Cassian's back arches off the bed as Rowan's knot swells inside him, locking them together. "Now!" he gasps, baring his neck in complete surrender. "Bite me now." Rowan's eyes go feral, his alpha instincts screaming to claim what's his. But his hand trembles against Cassian's throat. "Once I do this, there's no going back. The bond is permanent." Cassian can feel tears streaming down his face, months of fear worn with desperate need. His father's voice echoes in his mind, warnings about losing himself, becoming nothing but an alpha's possession. But Rowan's love pulses through their incomplete connection, honest and overwhelming. "I trust you," Cassian whispers, though his voice shakes. Rowan's teeth find his neck, and the world stops breathing. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. Cassian had known exactly 3 things about himself for the past 21 years. 1. He was an Omega. 2. He would never bond with an Alpha because bonding meant losing control. And Cassian Monroe controlled everything in his life with meticulous precision. 3. He would rather die than submit to anyone, especially not some knothead alpha who thought a biological imperative gave them ownership over his body and choices. Then he met Rowan Blackthorne, and all 3 of those certainties shattered in the span of a single evening. It started 6 months ago, when Cassian accepted a position as the royal historian at Blackthorne Castle. The pay was exceptional, the archives were legendary, and most importantly, it would get him away from his father's endless matchmaking attempts. Every Omega in their province knew that unmated Omegas over 20 were considered practically expired goods, and Cassian's father seemed determined to marry him off to the first alpha who showed interest, regardless of compatibility or Cassian's own wishes. The castle job was perfect, remote, academic, and the listing specifically mentioned that King Rowan Blackthorne rarely visited the historical wing. Cassian would be left alone to catalog centuries of records, translate ancient texts, and lose himself in research. No alphas, no expectations, no heat cycles spent locked in his room while his father paraded potential mates outside his door. He should have known it was too good to be true. Cassian arrived at Blackthorne Castle on a gray October morning, the kind where fog clung to everything and made the world feel muffled and distant. The castle itself was magnificent in a brutal sort of way. All black stone and sharp towers, perched on a cliff overlooking a valley that dropped away into mist. It looked like something from a Gothic novel, which Cassian found oddly comforting. He'd always preferred his romance in books rather than reality. The head housekeeper, a beta woman named Margaret with kind eyes and an efficient manner, showed him to his quarters. A small suite in the east wing with a bedroom, sitting room, and private bath. The furniture was old but well maintained, and someone had left fresh flowers on the desk near the window. "The king wanted to ensure you'd be comfortable," Margaret said, setting down his bags. "He takes the historical archives very seriously. Your predecessor left rather suddenly, and we've been without a proper historian for nearly a year." "Left suddenly?" Cassian asked, curious despite himself. Margaret's expression became carefully neutral. "Personal reasons, nothing to concern yourself with. Now, the archives are on the 3rd floor of the North Tower. I'll show you tomorrow after you've had a chance to settle. Meals are served in the main hall, but if you prefer privacy, you can request a tray sent to your room." "I'll take my meals in my room," Cassian said immediately. The fewer people he had to interact with, the better, especially alphas. "As you wish. Is there anything else you need?" "Actually, yes. The listing mentioned that King Rowan rarely visits the historical wing. I'd like to confirm that arrangement." Margaret's lips twitched slightly. His Majesty spends most of his time managing the kingdom, council meetings, territory disputes, the usual demands of ruling. He has little time for dusty books and old records. Perfect, Cassian said, relief flooding through him. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. That night, alone in his new quarters, Cassian unpacked his belongings with methodical care. Clothes in the wardrobe, books on the shelves, his heat suppressants hidden in the bottom drawer of his bedside table. He'd been on suppressants since he presented at 16, determined never to experience a full heat cycle. The medication dulled his scent, prevented the desperate aching need, kept him functional and in control. His father hated it, called it unnatural, said Cassian was denying his true purpose. But Cassian's true purpose was his own to define, and it had nothing to do with spreading his legs for some alpha's knot. He fell asleep that first night feeling safe and hopeful for the first time in months. The next morning, Margaret showed him to the archives, and Cassian fell immediately in love. 3 floors of the North Tower were dedicated entirely to historical records. Thousands of books, scrolls, letters, and documents spanning back over 500 years of Blackthorn rule. The previous historian had made some progress cataloging the collection, but vast sections remained untouched, gathering dust in the dim light filtering through narrow windows. "It's overwhelming," Margaret said apologetically. "No one would blame you if you requested assistance." "No," Cassian breathed, running his fingers over a shelf of leather-bound volumes. "It's perfect. This is exactly what I wanted." And it was. For the first 3 weeks, Cassian lost himself completely in the work. He arrived at the archives each morning as soon as the sun rose, worked through lunch with nothing but tea and whatever pastries Margaret insisted on leaving outside his door, and didn't emerge until well after dark. The records were fascinating. Treaties and trade agreements, personal letters from long-dead kings, detailed accounts of border wars and diplomatic marriages. He saw no one except Margaret, who checked on him daily with quiet concern, and the occasional servant who brought fresh candles or wood for the small fireplace in the corner of the main archive room. No alphas, no expectations, just Cassian and 5 centuries of history. It was paradise. Then, on his 23rd day at the castle, Cassian made a discovery that changed everything. He'd been working through a collection of private correspondence from King Eric Blackthorn, who'd ruled 200 years ago. Most of it was standard diplomatic communication, but tucked between 2 formal letters was something different. A small leather-bound journal, the pages yellowed with age but the ink still legible. Cassian opened it carefully and began to read. Within 3 pages, his hands were shaking. It was a detailed account of Eric Blackthorn's relationship with his bonded Omega, a man named Julian, but not a sterile historical record. This was intimate, raw. Eric wrote about Julian's scent, how it drove him to madness during Julian's heats. He described in explicit detail the 3 days they'd spent locked in their chambers, Eric knotting Julian over and over until they were both exhausted and sated. He wrote about the claiming bite, how Julian had begged for it, how the bond that snapped into place between them was the most profound experience of Eric's life. Cassian should have closed the journal, should have set it aside and moved on to something more appropriate, but he couldn't stop reading. Eric described every intimate moment with his Omega, the way Julian's body opened for him, the sounds Julian made when Eric's knot locked them together, the satisfaction of filling his Omega with his release, of scenting him afterwards so everyone would know Julian belonged to him. By the time Cassian finished reading, his face was flushed, his body responding in ways he'd spent years suppressing. Heat pooled low in his belly, his entrance felt wet, slick, beginning to gather even though he was nowhere near his cycle. His suppressants should have prevented this, but apparently 200-year-old royal porn was stronger than modern medicine. Interesting reading? Cassian jumped, nearly dropping the journal. He spun around to find a man standing in the archive doorway, and his entire world tilted sideways. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a powerful build that spoke of both physical labor and combat training. His hair was black, cut short on the sides but longer on top, fallen across his forehead in a way that should have looked careless, but instead looked deliberate. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they were currently fixed on Cassian with an intensity that made breathing difficult. He wore simple clothes, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, dark pants, boots, nothing that screamed royalty. But the way he carried himself, the natural authority in his posture, told Cassian exactly who this was before the man even spoke. "Your Majesty," Cassian managed, scrambling to his feet and attempting what he hoped was an appropriate bow. The journal tumbled from his lap, falling open to a particularly explicit page. Of course, King Rowan Blackthorn's eyes flicked to the open journal, and something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "I see you found Eric's private writings. Those aren't technically part of the official historical record." "I apologize," Cassian said quickly, heat flooding his face. "I didn't realize. I was cataloging the correspondence collection, and it was mixed in with the formal letters. I should have stopped reading when I realized what it was." "But you didn't stop," Rowan observed, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. He stepped further into the room, and Cassian became acutely aware of 2 things. 1. Rowan was an alpha, the most alpha Cassian had ever encountered. His scent filled the space, wood smoke and pine and something dark and wild that made Cassian's omega instincts sit up and take notice. 2. Rowan was looking at him the way a predator looks at prey, not threatening exactly, but definitely interested. "It was historically significant," Cassian said, trying to sound professional despite the fact that his body was doing things it absolutely should not be doing. More slick gathering, his entrance starting to ache in a way he'd never experienced. The personal writings of rulers often provide insights into the social and cultural context of their era. "Is that what you were thinking about while you read?" Rowan asked, moving closer. "The social and cultural context?" "Yes," Cassian lied. Rowan smiled, slow and knowing. Liar. The word hung between them. Cassian's heart was racing. He should step back, should create distance, should do literally anything other than stand here, drowning in an alpha's scent, while his body betrayed every principle he'd ever held. "I was thinking," Cassian heard himself say, "that Eric Blackthorn was remarkably detailed in his descriptions of intimacy with his bonded Omega." "He was obsessed with Julian," Rowan said, now close enough that Cassian could feel the heat radiating from his body. "According to family history, they were true mates. The bond was so strong that when Julian died, Eric followed within a week. They say he couldn't bear to exist without his Omega." "That's," Cassian swallowed hard, "tragic. Or romantic, depending on your perspective." Rowan's eyes were doing something to him, looking at him in a way that made Cassian feel exposed, like Rowan could see right through all his careful defenses to the part of him that was screaming, "Want, want, want." "You're the new historian, Cassian Monroe. You know my name. I know everything that happens in my castle. I also know you've been hiding up here for 3 weeks, avoiding everyone, taking your meals in your room. Margaret says you work from dawn until well after dark." "I'm dedicated to my work," Cassian said, lifting his chin. "You're hiding," Rowan corrected gently. "The question is what you're hiding from." "I'm not hiding from anything. I simply prefer solitude to needless social interaction." "Needless," Rowan repeated. He reached out slowly, giving Cassian plenty of time to move away, and picked up the fallen journal. His fingers brushed Cassian's, and the contact sent electricity shooting up Cassian's arm. Is that what this would be? Needless. Cassian's breath caught. Was Rowan Blackthorne, the Alpha King of the entire Northern Territories, flirting with him? That couldn't be right. Kings didn't flirt with lowly historians, especially not Omega historians who'd made it abundantly clear they wanted nothing to do with alphas. I don't, Cassian started, then stopped. What was he trying to say? That he didn't want this? His body was calling him a liar. That he wasn't interested. Rowan's slight smile suggested he knew exactly how interested Cassian was. You don't what? Rowan prompted. I don't do this, Cassian finally said. Whatever this is, I'm here to work, not to engage in what? Conversation? Getting to know the person who employs you? Rowan's tone was light, but there was an edge underneath. Challenge, maybe. In flirtation with alphas who think they can use their scent to manipulate omegas into submission. The words came out harsher than Cassian intended, but he didn't take them back. Better to establish boundaries now than to let this continue. Rowan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. Is that what you think I'm doing? Using my scent to manipulate you? Isn't it what all alphas do? No, Rowan said flatly. It's not. And if that's been your experience with alphas, then you've been meeting the wrong ones. He set the journal down on the desk, his movements careful and controlled. I came up here because I wanted to meet my new historian. Margaret speaks highly of you. And I was curious about the Omega who's made more progress cataloging the archives in 3 weeks than the previous historian managed in 3 years. Cassian felt shame curl in his stomach. He'd been rude, defensive, lashing out because his body was responding in ways he didn't want and couldn't control. I apologize. That was uncalled for. Was it? Or were you being honest about how you feel? Rowan studied him for a long moment. I appreciate honesty, Cassian, even when it's uncomfortable. So let me be honest with you. Yes, I noticed you're an Omega. Yes, I noticed you have a beautiful scent, even dampened by what I assume are very strong suppressants. And yes, I find you attractive. But none of that means I'm trying to manipulate you. It means I'm an alpha who's drawn to an omega he finds interesting. What happens with that attraction is entirely up to you. The frank admission left Cassian speechless. Alphas didn't usually acknowledge their interest so directly. They circled and postured and tried to prove their dominance. They didn't just state their attraction and then make it clear the Omega held all the power. I'm not interested in bonding, Cassian said, because he needed Rowan to understand this. I'm not interested in heat partnerships or casual encounters or anything that involves an alpha's knot. I came here to work. Then you'll work, Rowan said simply, and I'll leave you to it. But Cassian, just because you're not interested now doesn't mean you won't be later. And when you change your mind, if you change your mind, I'll be here. The confidence in his voice made Cassian's stomach flutter. You're very sure of yourself. I'm very sure of what I felt when I walked into this room and caught your scent, Rowan said. But I'm patient. I can wait. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. If you're going to continue reading Eric's journal, I recommend locking the door. Some of the later entries get quite explicit, and you wouldn't want to be interrupted. Then he was gone, leaving Cassian alone with his racing heart, his trembling hands, and the undeniable evidence of his body's arousal. That night, Cassian didn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had happened. King Rowan Blackthorne was interested in him, had basically stated his intention to pursue Cassian if given the opportunity. And Cassian's body, traitorous thing that it was, wanted to be pursued. The suppressants should have prevented this, should have kept his omega instincts safely locked away. But something about Rowan's scent had bypassed all his careful defenses and awakened parts of himself Cassian had been suppressing for years. He wanted to know what Rowan's hands would feel like on his skin. Wanted to know if Rowan would be gentle or rough. Wanted to know what it would feel like to have an alpha's knot inside him, stretching him, filling him, locking them together the way Eric had described in his journal. The wanting terrified him, because wanting led to needing, and needing led to dependence, and dependence led to losing yourself completely in someone else. Cassian had watched it happen to his mother, watched her become a shadow of herself after bonding with his father, watched her defer every decision, every thought, every desire to her alpha. That wasn't love, that was ownership. Cassian would rather be alone forever than become someone's possession. But even as he renewed his resolve to avoid Rowan Blackthorn, his body ached with need he couldn't suppress. His entrance was wet, slick, coating his inner thighs despite the suppressants. His whole body felt feverish, hypersensitive. When he touched himself, trying to find relief, he imagined Rowan's hands instead of his own, Rowan's mouth on his neck, Rowan's body covering his. He came with Rowan's name on his lips and hated himself for it. The next few weeks established a pattern. Cassian worked in the archives, losing himself in centuries-old records. Rowan appeared unpredictably, always with some excuse. He needed to consult a specific treaty. He wanted Cassian's opinion on a historical precedent for a current territorial dispute. He was simply checking on the progress of the cataloging. Each visit lasted longer than the last. They talked about history, about the kingdom, about nothing in particular. Rowan never touched him again, never even came particularly close. But his presence filled the space, his scent wrapping around Cassian like a physical thing. Cassian told himself he hated these interruptions, told himself Rowan was disrupting his work. But he started listening for Rowan's footsteps, started anticipating his visits, started spending more time on his appearance in the mornings just in case. He was falling, and he knew it, and he couldn't seem to stop. 2 months after their first meeting, everything changed again. Cassian woke up feeling wrong. His skin was too hot, too sensitive. His sheets felt rough against his body. Between his legs, he was soaked with slick, more than he'd ever produced even in the early days before the suppressants. His heat was coming. That was impossible. He'd taken his suppressants faithfully every day. He'd never missed a dose, but his body didn't care about impossibility. It knew what it wanted, and what it wanted was an alpha's knot. Cassian tried to stand and nearly collapsed. His legs were shaking, weak. More slick gushed from his entrance, running down his thighs. The ache inside him was unbearable, a desperate emptiness that demanded to be filled. He needed help, needed to get to his suppressants, needed to double his dose, needed to stop this before it got worse. But when he tried to reach his bedside table, his hand was trembling too badly to grip the handle. Another wave of heat crashed through him, and Cassian heard himself whimper. His body was preparing itself for an alpha. His entrance was opening, relaxing, ready to be claimed. His scent was intensifying, no longer dampened by the suppressants. Sweet vanilla and honey with an undertone of desperation that would call to every alpha within scenting range. He needed to lock his door, needed to make sure no one could get in until this passed. But he couldn't move, could barely think past the overwhelming need consuming him. Then he smelled it. Wood smoke and pine and dark wild alpha. Rowan. Cassian's omega instincts roared to life, demanding he present, demanding he call out, demanding he invite the alpha in to ease this terrible aching need. But the rational part of his brain, the part that was still functioning, knew that would be a disaster. If Rowan saw him like this, if Rowan scented him in full heat, everything Cassian had been fighting against would become inevitable. He had to warn Rowan away, had to tell him to leave, to get far away from this wing of the castle, before Cassian's scent drove them both to do something they'd regret. But when Cassian tried to speak, the only sound that came out was a desperate, keen, high and needy, the universal call of an omega in heat seeking an alpha. He heard Rowan's footsteps stop outside his door, heard the sharp intake of breath as Rowan caught his scent. "Cassian?" Rowan's voice was strained, rough. "Cassian, are you in heat?" "Don't answer," Cassian told himself. "Don't say anything. Let him think you're not here." "Please," Cassian heard himself sob. "Please, I can't, please." The door opened. Rowan stood in the doorway, and even through the haze of heat, Cassian could see him fighting for control. His pupils were blown wide, his breathing harsh. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles white with tension. "Your scent," Rowan said, his voice barely human. "Cassian, your scent is driving me feral." "I know," Cassian managed. "I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. My suppressants should have prevented this. I've never had a breakthrough heat. I don't—" Another wave crashed through him, and he cried out, curling in on himself. Rowan moved then, crossing the room in 3 long strides. But instead of grabbing Cassian, instead of taking what the heat was offering, he knelt beside the bed and very carefully didn't touch. "How can I help?" Rowan asked, and the strain in his voice told Cassian what it was costing him to maintain control. "Tell me what you need." "I need." Cassian's body knew exactly what he needed, but he couldn't say it, wouldn't say it. "I need you to leave. Before I do something I'll regret. I'm not leaving you like this. You have to. If you stay, I'll beg you to not me. My heat will make me say things I don't mean. And then tomorrow I'll hate both of us." Rowan's jaw clenched. "There are other ways to help. I can get supplies, cool cloths, water. I can find something to ease the worst of it without nodding me." Cassian laughed, the sound breaking on a sob. "Nothing else will work. You know that. Once a heat starts, only an alpha's knot can satisfy it." "Then let me help you," Rowan said, his control clearly fracturing. "Cassian, I can scent your pain, your suffering. Let me ease it. And then what? You knot me once and we're bonded? You claim me and I lose everything I am to the bond?" "No," Rowan said fiercely. "It doesn't work like that. Knotting doesn't create a bond. Only a claiming bite does that. And I swear to you, I will not bite you without your explicit consent. Not during your heat, not ever." Cassian wanted to believe him, wanted it desperately. But the heat was getting worse, consuming his ability to think rationally. His entrance was clenching around nothing, aching to be filled. Slick was pouring from him, soaking the sheets. "I can't think," he whimpered. "Everything hurts, and I can't think clearly, and I don't trust what I want right now." "Then trust what I want," Rowan said. "I want to help you through this heat. I want to ease your pain. I want to knot you and hold you and make sure you're safe and satisfied. But I also want you to remember this tomorrow and not regret it. So tell me, Cassian, if you weren't in heat, if you could think clearly, would you want this?" The question cut through the haze. Would he want this? He'd been fantasizing about Rowan for 2 months. Had touched himself countless times imagining Rowan's hands, Rowan's mouth, Rowan's body. Had read Eric's journal over and over, picturing himself as Julian, picturing Rowan claiming him with desperate need and infinite tenderness. "Yes," Cassian admitted, the truth ripping out of him. "I've wanted you since the day we met. I've been fighting it because I'm terrified of losing myself." But yes, I want this. I want you." Something triumphant flashed in Rowan's eyes. "Then you'll have me. For as long as your heat lasts, I'm yours. But Cassian, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about satisfying your heat. I meant what I said 2 months ago. I find you interesting, attractive, compelling. When this heat is over, I'm not walking away. I'm going to court you properly, take you to dinner, learn everything about you, earn the right to be with you outside of biological necessity." "You want to court me?" Cassian asked, stunned even through the heat haze. "I want everything with you," Rowan said simply. "But right now, you need immediate help. So I'm going to ask one more time. Do I have your permission to ease your heat?" Cassian looked at this alpha who'd been patient and respectful and honest from the beginning, who was kneeling beside his bed fighting his own instincts to make sure Cassian truly consented, who promised this would be the beginning of something rather than the end. "Yes," Cassian breathed. "Please, I need you." Rowan's control finally broke. He stood and in one fluid motion stripped off his shirt, revealing a torso carved from muscle and scattered with scars. Then he was on the bed, covering Cassian's body with his own, and the weight of him felt like salvation. "I've got you," Rowan murmured against Cassian's ear. "I'm going to take care of you, going to ease this ache, going to fill you exactly how you need." His hands were everywhere, stroking Cassian's overheated skin, learning the shape of him. When his fingers finally slid between Cassian's legs, finding him soaked and open and desperate, Cassian cried out at the contact. "So wet for me," Rowan praised, his fingers exploring Cassian's entrance. "Your body knows what it needs, knows I'm going to take care of you." He pressed one finger inside, and Cassian's back arched off the bed. It wasn't enough, nowhere near enough, but it was the first time anyone had touched him there, and the sensation was overwhelming. "More," Cassian begged. "Please, more." Rowan added another finger, stretching him carefully, despite Cassian's desperate pleas to hurry. "I know you want my knot, but I need to prepare you first. I'm bigger than average, and I won't hurt you, even if your heat makes you think you can take it." The consideration, the care, made something in Cassian's chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with heat. Rowan was being gentle with him, putting Cassian's comfort above his own desperate need. When Rowan finally had 3 fingers inside him, working him open with patient skill, Cassian was sobbing with need. "Please, please, I'm ready. I need you inside me. I need your knot. Please, Alpha, please." The Alpha title slipped out without permission, but Rowan groaned at hearing it. "Say it again," he demanded. "Call me Alpha again." "Alpha," Cassian gasped. "My Alpha, please claim me. Please knot me. I need it. I need you." Rowan removed his fingers and Cassian whimpered at the loss. But then Rowan was positioning himself, the blunt head of his length pressing against Cassian's entrance. And nothing else mattered. "Look at me," Rowan commanded. And Cassian's eyes flew open, their gazes locked as Rowan began to push inside, slow and steady and impossibly thick. The stretch was intense, almost too much despite the preparation. Cassian's body fought to accommodate Rowan's size, his inner walls fluttering and clenching around the intrusion. "Breathe," Rowan coached, holding perfectly still. "Relax and breathe. Your body knows how to do this." Cassian tried to obey, forcing his muscles to unclench. As soon as he relaxed, Rowan slid deeper, and the sensation was incredible. He was being filled, stretched, claimed in the most fundamental way. "That's it," Rowan praised, his voice strained with the effort of going slow. "Taking me so well. You're perfect, Cassian. Absolutely perfect." When Rowan was finally fully seated inside him, Cassian felt complete for the first time in his life. The terrible emptiness was gone, replaced by fullness and pressure and rightness. "Please move," he begged. I need. Rowan moved, pulling almost all the way out before thrusting back in, and Cassian screamed at the pleasure that crashed through him. Every nerve ending was on fire, every sensation magnified by the heat raging through his system. Rowan set a rhythm, deep, powerful strokes that hit something inside Cassian that made him see stars. His hands gripped Cassian's hips, holding him steady as he claimed him over and over. "You feel incredible," Rowan groaned. "So hot and tight around me, like you were made for my knot." The promise of his knot made Cassian clench involuntarily, and Rowan's rhythm faltered. "Don't do that or I'll knot you before you're ready." "I'm ready now," Cassian insisted. "Please, I need your knot. Need to feel you lock inside me. Need." His words dissolved into incoherent pleas as Rowan picked up the pace, driving into him with increasing urgency. Cassian could feel it building, the pressure at the base of Rowan's length beginning to swell. "Going to knot you now," Rowan warned. "Going to lock us together and fill you until you're satisfied. Is that what you want?" "Yes, yes, please, Alpha. Please give me your knot." Rowan thrust deep one final time, and the knot swelled fully, stretching Cassian impossibly wider, locking them together. At the same moment, Cassian felt Rowan's release flooding him, hot and endless, marking him from the inside. The combination of fullness and heat and being locked to his alpha triggered Cassian's own climax, pleasure crashing through him in waves that seemed to go on forever. He was distantly aware that he was screaming, that his body was convulsing around Rowan's knot, that he'd never felt anything so intense in his entire life. When the waves finally subsided, Cassian collapsed back against the pillows, completely spent. Rowan carefully maneuvered them onto their sides, still locked together, and pulled Cassian against his chest. "I've got you," Rowan murmured, pressing kisses to Cassian's sweaty hair. "You did so well, took my knot perfectly." Cassian should have felt embarrassed, should have regretted what they'd just done. But wrapped in Rowan's arms, locked together by his knot, still feeling the aftershocks of pleasure, he couldn't find it in himself to regret a single moment. "How long?" Cassian asked, his voice hoarse from screaming. "Until my knot goes down, usually 15 to 30 minutes for the first time. Your heat will demand more after that. It could be days before you're satisfied." Days locked in this room with Rowan, being knotted over and over. The thought should have terrified Cassian. Instead, it sent a fresh wave of need through his heat-addled body. "I want that," Cassian admitted. "I want you to knot me again and again until my heat breaks." "Then that's exactly what I'll do," Rowan promised. "I'll take care of you, Cassian, for as long as you need." They lay together while Rowan's knot slowly deflated, neither speaking, just existing in this moment of perfect satisfaction. When the knot finally released, Cassian felt Rowan's release start to leak from him, and something primal in his omega nature purred with contentment. But the heat wasn't done with him yet. Within minutes the ache was building again, need rising like a tide. His entrance clenched around nothing, already missing the stretch and fullness of Rowan's knot. "Again," Cassian whimpered. "I need you again." "I know," Rowan soothed, already repositioning them. "I can scent it. Your heat is demanding more." This time, Rowan took him from behind, pulling Cassian's hips up and entering him in one smooth thrust. The new angle let him go even deeper, and Cassian buried his face in the pillows to muffle his cries. Rowan was less gentle this time, driven by Cassian's desperate heat scent to claim him with more urgency. His hands gripped Cassian's hips hard enough to bruise, holding him in place as he pounded into him. "You smell so good," Rowan groaned. "Your heat scent is driving me insane. Want to bury myself in you and never leave." "Then don't leave," Cassian begged. "Stay inside me, keep knotting me, make me yours." The words were heat talking, he knew that, but they felt true in the moment, felt like the most honest thing he'd ever said. Rowan's knot swelled again and locked them together, and Cassian came for the second time, pleasure overwhelming his senses until he couldn't think, couldn't breathe, could only feel. They spent the next 3 days exactly like that, nodding and resting and nodding again. Rowan left only to bring food and water, making sure Cassian stayed hydrated and fed between rounds. He was patient and attentive, reading Cassian's needs before Cassian even voiced them, adjusting his approach based on what Cassian's body was demanding. By the end of the second day, Cassian lost count of how many times they'd joined, lost track of where he ended and Rowan began. His body was deliciously sore, well used in the best way. He was covered in marks from Rowan's mouth, his inner thighs bruised from Rowan's grip, his entrance tender but satisfied. On the morning of the fourth day, Cassian woke to find the heat had finally broken. His skin was no longer feverish. The desperate, aching need was gone. He was just himself again, lying in bed with an alpha's arm wrapped around his waist. Rowan was still asleep, his face relaxed in a way Cassian had never seen while he was awake. He looked younger like this, less like a powerful king, and more like just a man who'd spent 3 days satisfying his Omega's heat. His Omega. The thought should have sent Cassian into panic, should have made him bolt from the bed and demand Rowan leave. But it didn't, because somewhere between the first knot and the last, something had shifted in Cassian's heart. He'd been terrified of losing himself to an alpha, terrified of becoming someone's possession. But Rowan had proven over and over during the heat that he saw Cassian as a person, not property. Had asked permission before every new position, had checked constantly that Cassian was comfortable, had put Cassian's needs above his own repeatedly. This wasn't ownership. This was partnership. Rowan's eyes opened, immediately focusing on Cassian. Your heat broke. Yes, Cassian said. I can think clearly again. A flash of vulnerability crossed Rowan's face. And now that you can think clearly, do you regret this? Cassian considered the question seriously. Did he regret the past 3 days? Regret letting Rowan knot him, claim him, mark him? Regret the intimacy they'd shared? No, he said finally. I don't regret it. I'm terrified of what it means. And I still have 1,000 concerns about bonding and losing my independence. But I don't regret you. Relief flooded Rowan's expression. Good, because I meant what I said about courting you. Now that you've had my knot, I'm not letting you go easily. Possessive alpha, Cassian teased, but there was no real criticism in his voice. Absolutely, Rowan agreed without shame. You're mine now, Cassian, and I protect what's mine. The mine thing should have bothered Cassian more than it did. He'd spent his entire adult life fighting against exactly this kind of possessive alpha behavior. But when Rowan said it, when he claimed Cassian as his with such absolute certainty, all Cassian felt was safe. They stayed in bed for another hour, just talking. Rowan told him about growing up as the only heir to the Blackthorn throne, the pressure and loneliness of knowing your entire life was mapped out before you were old enough to choose. Cassian shared stories of his childhood, of watching his mother slowly disappear into her bond, until she was nothing but an extension of his father's will. That won't happen to us, Rowan said firmly when Cassian voiced his fears. A bond is only as controlling as the people in it allow it to be. Your father dominated your mother because she let him, or because she was taught that's what bonding meant. But it doesn't have to be that way. How can you be sure? Cassian asked. Once we're bonded, won't you be able to feel everything I feel? Won't the connection make it impossible for me to deny you anything? The bond works both ways, Rowan explained. I'll feel your emotions, yes, but you'll feel mine too. You'll know if I'm trying to manipulate you or control you. And more than that, Cassian, I don't want a mindless Omega who obeys my every command. I want you, sharp and challenging and independent. A bond won't change who you are unless you let it. Cassian wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this could be different from what he'd witnessed growing up. But years of fear didn't disappear in one conversation, no matter how earnest Rowan seemed. "I need time," Cassian said finally, "to process all of this, to figure out what I want separate from what my heat made me feel." "Take all the time you need," Rowan said. "I told you I'm patient, and I meant what I said about courting you. I want to earn your trust, not demand it because of biology." They finally got out of bed, and Cassian discovered his entire body ached in the most delicious way. Every movement reminded him of the past 3 days, of being claimed over and over until he was boneless and satisfied. Rowan insisted on drawing him a bath, and Cassian was too sore to argue. He sank into the hot water with a grateful sigh, while Rowan sat on the edge of the tub, running wet fingers through Cassian's hair. "I should probably leave you alone," Rowan said, though he made no move to go. "Give you space to think, without my scent influencing you." "Stay," Cassian heard himself say, "just for a little while longer. I'm not ready to be alone yet." Relief flashed across Rowan's face, and Cassian realized the Alpha had been worried Cassian would push him away the moment the heat ended. The vulnerability in that expression made Cassian's heart ache. "I'm not going to pretend the last 3 days didn't happen," Cassian said quietly. "I'm not going to act like you didn't knot me and make me feel things I've never felt before. But I also can't just jump into a bond because my body responded to yours during heat. I need to know this is real, outside of biological imperatives." "It is real," Rowan said with conviction, "but I understand you need to prove that to yourself. So we'll take it slow. I'll court you the traditional way, dates and conversations and getting to know each other without the heat driving us." "What if we don't work outside of heat compatibility?" Cassian asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in his mind. "What if once we're not being driven by biology, we realize we have nothing in common?" "We've been talking for 2 months before your heat," Rowan pointed out. "Every time I came to the archives, I stayed longer than I intended because I enjoyed your company. I liked hearing your thoughts on history, on politics, on everything. The physical attraction is powerful, yes, but it's not the only thing between us." Cassian considered this. It was true that he'd enjoyed their conversations, had started looking forward to Rowan's visits, even while telling himself he shouldn't. Maybe there was something real here beyond the heat. After his bath, Rowan reluctantly left to attend to the kingdom business he'd been ignoring for 3 days. Cassian dressed in clean clothes and made his way carefully down to the archives, his body still protesting every movement. Margaret found him there an hour later, sitting at his desk staring at Eric's journal without really seeing it. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently, setting down a tray with tea and pastries. "The entire castle knows you went into heat. They're gossiping about the king spending 3 days in your chambers." Cassian felt his face heat with embarrassment. "I didn't mean for it to happen. My suppressants should have prevented a breakthrough heat." "Suppressants fail sometimes," Margaret said, her tone neutral and non-judgmental, "especially when there's a particularly compatible alpha nearby. The scent can override the medication." "So this was inevitable?" Cassian asked, not sure how he felt about that. "Maybe, maybe not. But it happened, and now you have to decide what you want to do about it." She paused, then added carefully, "King Rowan is a good man. I've served this family for 20 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "Everyone keeps telling me he's different," Cassian said, "that he won't be like other alphas, but how can I know that for sure?" "You can't," Margaret said honestly. "Not until you trust him enough to find out. But Cassian, fear is a terrible reason to deny yourself happiness. Don't let what happened to your mother dictate your entire life." After Margaret left, Cassian opened Eric's journal again, this time reading with new perspective. He'd been so focused on the explicit details of their intimacy that he'd missed the deeper story underneath. Eric and Julian's relationship had been a partnership. Julian had advised Eric on matters of state, had challenged his decisions, had maintained his own identity even within the bond. In one entry dated 5 years into their bonding, Eric wrote about an argument they'd had over a trade agreement. Julian had disagreed with Eric's approach and presented a compelling alternative. Eric had been angry initially, his alpha pride wounded by his omega's contradiction, but after considering Julian's points, he'd admitted Julian was right and changed his approach. The bond did not make Julian mindless or obedient, Eric had written. It made us stronger together. His intelligence and perspective complement my own. I am a better king because I have an omega who challenges me rather than simply agreeing with everything I say. Cassian set down the journal with new understanding. Maybe bonding didn't have to mean losing himself. Maybe with the right alpha, it could mean finding a partner who made him stronger rather than weaker. Over the next few weeks, Rowan kept his promise about courting Cassian properly. He took him to dinner in the castle's formal dining room. Just the two of them with candles and wine and conversation that lasted for hours. He arranged for them to go riding through the kingdom's forests, showing Cassian places of stunning beauty he'd never have found on his own. They talked about everything. Rowan's responsibilities as king, the weight of ruling, and the loneliness that came with it. Cassian's passion for history, his dreams of eventually writing a comprehensive account of the Blackthorn dynasty, their fears and hopes and the experiences that had shaped them. Cassian learned that Rowan had been engaged once before to an omega from a neighboring kingdom. The match had been arranged by their parents, designed to cement a political alliance, but the omega had fallen in love with someone else and broken the engagement, leaving Rowan to face the scandal and his parents' disappointment. I told myself I was fine with it, Rowan admitted one evening as they walked through the castle gardens, that an arranged marriage without love was what I should expect as king. But truthfully, I was relieved. I didn't love her, and I didn't want to spend my life pretending. Is that why you never bonded? Cassian asked. You were waiting for something real? I was waiting for you, Rowan said simply. I didn't know it at the time, but yes, I was waiting for someone who made me feel the way you do. Cassian's heart did complicated things in his chest. How do I make you feel? Alive, Rowan said, stopping to face him. Like everything before, you was just going through the motions. You challenge me, interest me, make me want to be better. And when I'm with you, I feel like I can be myself instead of just the king. Cassian had been fighting his feelings for weeks, telling himself he needed more time, more proof, but standing in the garden with moonlight silvering Rowan's features and honesty shining in his eyes, Cassian couldn't fight anymore. I'm falling in love with you, Cassian admitted, the words escaping before he could stop them. I've been trying not to, trying to protect myself. But I'm fallen anyway, and it terrifies me. Rowan's face transformed with joy. Don't be terrified. I'm falling too. I've been falling since the day I found you reading Eric's journal with that adorable blush on your face. I was not blushing, Cassian protested, but he was smiling. You absolutely were, Rowan said, pulling him close. And I wanted to kiss you so badly I had to leave before I did something inappropriate. Kiss me now, Cassian said, going up on his toes. Please. Rowan did, and it was different from the desperate kisses during Cassian's heat. This was slow and sweet and full of promise. This was the kiss of two people building something real together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Rowan rested his forehead against Cassian's. I want to bond with you, he said quietly. Not because of heat compatibility or political advantage or any other reason, except that I love you and I want to spend my life with you. Cassian's breath caught. This was it. The moment he'd been both dreading and anticipating. The decision that would change everything. I'm still scared, he admitted. Scared of losing myself. Scared of becoming what my mother became. Then we'll take it slow, Rowan said. We don't have to bond immediately. We can keep courting, keep building trust. I'll wait as long as you need. But looking into Rowan's eyes, feeling the absolute certainty of his own feelings, Cassian realized he didn't want to wait. He'd been running from this his entire adult life, and for what? To prove a point? To avoid becoming his mother? Those were terrible reasons to deny himself happiness. I don't want to wait, Cassian said, surprising himself with the decisiveness in his voice. I want to bond with you, but Rowan, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that you'll tell me if I start losing myself in the bond. Promise me that you want a partner, not a possession. Promise me that you'll never use the bond to manipulate or control me. I promise, Rowan said solemnly. Cassian, I swear to you on everything I am that I will spend every day of our bonded life making sure you feel valued and heard and respected. You're not a possession to me. You're my equal, my partner, the person I choose to share my life with. The sincerity in his voice made Cassian's last defenses crumble. Then bond me, he whispered. Claim me properly. Make me yours. Rowan's eyes darkened with heat and possession. Are you sure? Once I bite you, once the bond forms, there's no undoing it. I'm sure, Cassian said, and he was. Despite all his fears, despite everything he'd believed about bonding, he was absolutely certain that this was right, that Rowan was right. Not here, Rowan said, his voice rough with barely controlled need. I want to do this properly, in my chambers, where I can take my time and make sure you feel everything. They barely made it to Rowan's chambers. The moment the door closed behind them, Rowan had Cassian pressed against it, kissing him with desperate hunger. His hands were everywhere, relearning the body he'd claimed during the heat. I've wanted to do this again since your heat ended, Rowan admitted between kisses. Wanted to touch you, taste you, bury myself inside you. Then do it, Cassian gasped. I want everything, Rowan. Your knot, your bite, your bond. Rowan lifted him easily, and Cassian wrapped his legs around his waist. Rowan carried him to the massive bed and laid him down with reverent care. This time will be different, Rowan said as he slowly undressed Cassian. During your heat, you needed it hard and fast. But tonight, I'm going to worship every inch of you. Going to show you exactly how much you mean to me. He was true to his word. He took his time, kissing and touching and exploring until Cassian was trembling with need. When Rowan's mouth found sensitive places that made Cassian cry out, he lavished attention there until Cassian was begging for more. Please, Cassian finally sobbed. I need you inside me, need to feel you're not again. Soon, Rowan promised, his fingers working Cassian open with patient skill. I need to make sure you're ready. I'm going to knot you and then I'm going to bite you, and I want you to feel nothing but pleasure when I do. When Rowan finally entered him, it felt like coming home. Cassian's body opened for him eagerly, welcoming him deep. The fullness was perfect, the stretch exactly what he needed. Rowan set a slow, deep rhythm, angling his movements to hit the spot inside Cassian that made stars explode behind his eyes. His hands were gentle on Cassian's hips, holding him close but never tight enough to bruise. I love you, Rowan said, his eyes locked on Cassian's. I love everything about you. Your intelligence, your passion, your stubbornness. I love the way you challenge me and make me think. I love the little crease you get between your eyebrows when you're concentrating on research. I love the sound you make when you're pleased about something you've discovered in the archives. Cassian felt tears gathering in his eyes at the tenderness in Rowan's voice. I love you too, he managed. I love your patience and your kindness. I love how you see me as a person rather than just an omega. I love the way you make me feel safe and valued and wanted. You are wanted, Rowan said fiercely, his rhythm picking up. So desperately wanted. I'm going to spend the rest of our lives making sure you know exactly how much. Cassian could feel it building, both his climax and Rowan's knot beginning to swell. Now, he gasped. Bite me now, please. I want to feel the bond form while you're knotting me. Rowan's control shattered at the plea. His knot swelled fully, locking them together, and at the same moment, his teeth found the junction of Cassian's neck and shoulder. The claiming bite was sharp and perfect, pain and pleasure mixing until Cassian couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Then the bond snapped into place. Cassian had known intellectually what to expect. The bond would create a connection between them, allowing them to sense each other's emotions. But knowing it intellectually and experiencing it were completely different things. He could feel Rowan, not just physically, though that was overwhelming enough, with Rowan's knot locked inside him and his release filling him. But emotionally, he could feel Rowan's love, vast and unconditional and absolute. Could feel his protectiveness, his desire to cherish and care for Cassian. Could feel his relief that Cassian had finally accepted the bond. And underneath all of that, he could feel Rowan's commitment to keeping his promises. The determination to be a partner rather than an owner. The genuine respect for Cassian's autonomy and intelligence. The bond didn't feel like chains. It felt like wings. I can feel you, Cassian gasped, overwhelmed by the intensity of it. I can feel how much you love me. And I can feel you, Rowan said, wonder in his voice. Can feel that you're not afraid anymore. Can feel your trust, your love, your certainty that this was the right choice. They clung to each other as their climaxes crashed through them, the bond amplifying every sensation until it was almost too much to bear. Cassian felt his own pleasure, and Rowan's simultaneously, a feedback loop that left them both shaking and gasping. When they finally came down from the high, still locked together by Rowan's knot, Cassian tested the bond cautiously. It was there, a warm, constant presence in the back of his mind. He could feel Rowan's contentment, his satisfaction, his deep, abiding love. It's not overwhelming, Cassian said, surprised. I thought it would be constant noise, constant awareness of everything you feel. But it's more like a gentle hum unless I focus on it. The bond adjusts to what we need, Rowan explained, running soothing hands down Cassian's back. Right now you need space to process, so it's given you that. But if you were in danger or deeply distressed, it would intensify so I could find you and help. That actually sounds useful rather than invasive, Cassian admitted. A healthy bond enhances both partners, Rowan said. It doesn't diminish either of you. You're still completely yourself, Cassian. You just have a direct line to my emotions now, and I have one to yours. Over the next few hours, as Rowan's knot gradually deflated and they made love twice more with increasing tenderness, Cassian explored the bond. He discovered he could push feelings to Rowan through it, could communicate without words. When Rowan did something that felt particularly good, Cassian sent appreciation and pleasure through the bond, and felt Rowan's answering satisfaction. This is actually incredible, Cassian said, as they finally lay tangled together in the early morning hours. I spent so long being terrified of bonding, but it's nothing like what I feared. That's because your mother's bond was twisted by your father's need for control, Rowan said. He used it as a weapon instead of a gift. But that's not what bonding has to be. Cassian snuggled closer, breathing in Rowan's scent. It was different now, mixing with his own until they smelled like each other, marked and mated and thoroughly claimed. I need to tell my father, Cassian said, reality intruding on their bubble of happiness. He's going to be furious that I bonded without consulting him. He had alphas lined up that he wanted me to consider. He can be as furious as he wants, Rowan said, a hint of alpha possessiveness entering his voice. You're mine now, bonded to a king. There's nothing he can do about it. He'll try to cause problems, Cassian warned. He's not the type to accept defeat gracefully. Let him try, Rowan said with absolute confidence. I'm the king of these territories. Your father has no power here. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Rowan announced their bonding to the court, and while some of the older nobles grumbled about the king bonding with a common Omega rather than forming a political alliance, most were supportive. Margaret had been right that the castle staff adored Cassian, and their genuine happiness at the bonding helped win over the skeptics. Cassian's father arrived 3 weeks after the announcement, face red with fury and indignation. He demanded a private audience with both Cassian and Rowan granted it, though he made it clear he was doing so as a courtesy rather than an obligation. You had no right to bond without my permission. Cassian's father, Edmund, spat the moment they were alone in the throne room. I am your father. The decision of your bonding should have been mine. I'm 21 years old, Cassian said calmly, the bond giving him strength he wouldn't have had alone. I don't need your permission to make my own choices. You're an Omega, Edmund said, as if that explained everything. Omegas don't have the judgment to choose appropriate alphas. That's why fathers arrange suitable matches. Cassian chose perfectly well on his own, Rowan said, his voice hard with barely controlled anger. He chose to bond with someone who loves and respects him, someone who values his intelligence and autonomy. Those seem like excellent criteria to me. You've brainwashed him, Edmund accused. Used your alpha influence to manipulate him into this bond. He did nothing of the sort, Cassian said, standing up from his chair. Rowan gave me time to think, space to decide. He never pressured me, never manipulated me. The only person who's ever tried to control me is you, father. Edmund's face went purple. How dare you speak to me that way? I raised you, provided for you, kept you safe. You treated me like property, Cassian interrupted, years of frustration finally finding voice. You put me on suppressants not because I asked for them, but because you wanted to control when and how I presented for potential mates. You paraded alphas through our home without asking if I was interested in any of them. You made every decision about my life without considering what I wanted. Because you would have made foolish choices, Edmund snapped. Look at what you've done. Bonded to a king without securing any advantage for your family. You could have negotiated a dowry, a title for me, positions for your cousins at court. Instead, you gave yourself away for nothing. I gave myself away for love, Cassian said. Something you clearly don't understand. Love, Edmund scoffed. Love doesn't pay for estates or secure family legacies. You're a fool, Cassian. And when this alpha tires of you, when the bond becomes a burden, you'll have nothing and no one to fall back on. That's enough, Rowan said, standing. His alpha presence filled the room, making even Edmund shrink back slightly. You will not speak to my bonded Omega that way. Cassian made his choice, and it's final. If you can't accept that with grace, then you're not welcome in this castle. You can't ban me from seeing my own son, Edmund protested. I absolutely can, Rowan said. I'm the king of these territories, and what I say goes. But I'm not banning you. I'm giving you a choice. Accept Cassian's bonding with genuine happiness, and you're welcome to visit whenever you like. But if you continue to treat him with disrespect, if you continue to try to control or manipulate him, then you'll find yourself permanently barred from these lands. Edmund looked between them, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he seemed to realize he had no leverage here. Fine, he bit out. I accept the bonding, but don't come crying to me when it falls apart. It won't fall apart, Cassian said with quiet confidence, because Rowan isn't you. He doesn't see bonding as ownership. He sees it as partnership. After Edmund left, Cassian sagged against Rowan with relief. That was harder than I expected. You were magnificent, Rowan said, pressing a kiss to his temple. So strong and sure. I was proud of you. Cassian could feel that pride through the bond, along with love and protectiveness and determination to make sure Edmund never hurt Cassian again. Thank you for standing up to him. Always, Rowan promised. You're mine to protect now. Anyone who tries to hurt you will have to go through me first. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Cassian continued his work in the archives, making steady progress on the cataloging project. But now he also attended council meetings with Rowan, offering perspectives on historical precedents that informed current decisions. The council members initially balked at having an Omega in their meetings, but Cassian's insights proved too valuable to dismiss. He became Rowan's unofficial advisor on matters of history and diplomacy. When territorial disputes arose, Cassian could point to treaties from centuries past that provided framework for resolution. When neighboring kingdoms sent envoys, Cassian's knowledge of diplomatic protocols and historical relationships proved invaluable. You're making me a better king, Rowan told him one evening as they prepared for bed. The council actually listens when I cite historical precedent now, because they know you've done the research. We make each other better, Cassian corrected, crawling into Rowan's arms. That's what partnership means. 6 months after their bonding, Cassian woke to a familiar sensation, heat. But this time it didn't terrify him. This time he had an alpha who loved him, a bond that connected them, and the absolute certainty that he was safe. Rowan, he murmured, pressing close. My heat's starting. Rowan woke immediately, his pupils dilating as he caught Cassian's intensifying scent. I can smell it. How do you feel? Needy, Cassian admitted, but not desperate like last time. This is gentler, like my body knows it will be satisfied. Because you're bonded now, Rowan explained, his hands already starting to roam. Heat is less intense with a bonded mate because your omega instincts aren't panicking about finding an alpha. They know your alpha is right here. They spent the next 3 days lost in each other, and it was different from Cassian's first heat. Still intense, still demanding, but tempered by love and familiarity. Rowan knew exactly how to touch him now, exactly what he needed. And Cassian felt safe enough to ask for what he wanted, to guide Rowan's hands and mouth to where he needed them most. When the heat finally broke, they lay tangled together in sweaty satisfaction, and Cassian sent a wave of contentment through the bond. Happy? Rowan asked, though he could already feel the answer. Completely, Cassian confirmed. I never thought I could be this happy. Never thought bonding could be this good. It's good because we make it good, Rowan said, because we chose each other, and we keep choosing each other every day. A year after their bonding, Cassian finally completed the first volume of his comprehensive history of the Blackthorn dynasty. He dedicated it to Rowan, with a note that read, "To my alpha, my partner, my love. Thank you for teaching me that surrender can be strength and that love is always worth the risk." The book was well received, praised for its meticulous research and engaging narrative. But Cassian's favorite review came from Rowan, who read it cover to cover and then made love to him with fierce pride. "You're brilliant," Rowan said, as they lay together afterward. "Absolutely brilliant, and I'm so lucky that you chose me." "We chose each other," Cassian corrected, as he always did. "That's what makes this work." They fell asleep in each other's arms, the bond humming contentedly between them, and Cassian marveled at how much his life had changed. He'd arrived at this castle a year and a half ago, determined to avoid alphas, convinced that bonding meant losing himself. Instead, he'd found himself, found his voice, his strength, his purpose, found a love that enhanced rather than diminished him, found a partner who saw him as an equal rather than a possession, and most importantly, he'd learned that the right bond with the right person didn't cage you, it set you free. Years later, when their first child was born, a daughter with Rowan's gray eyes and Cassian's stubborn determination, Cassian held her and made a silent promise. She would grow up knowing she had choices, would never be made to feel like her designation defined her worth, would see her father's partnership and know that love should be equal, respectful, and freely given. "What are you thinking?" Rowan asked, watching Cassian cradle their daughter. "I'm thinking about how wrong I was," Cassian said. "About bonding, about alphas, about everything. I spent so long running from this, and it turned out to be exactly what I needed." "You weren't wrong to be cautious," Rowan said gently. "You were protecting yourself from what you'd witnessed, but I'm glad you eventually took the risk." "So am I," Cassian said, leaning into Rowan's embrace. Their daughter made a small sound, and they both looked down at her with matching expressions of wonder and love. Through the bond, Cassian felt Rowan's overwhelming happiness, his pride in their family, his continued devotion to making sure Cassian never regretted choosing him. And Cassian sent back his own feelings, love and gratitude and absolute certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. He'd been terrified of losing himself in a bond. But what he'd actually lost was his fear, his loneliness, his belief that he had to face the world alone. And what he'd gained was everything. A partner who respected him, a love that fulfilled him, a life that was richer and fuller than anything he could have built alone. The bond didn't make him less, it made him more confident, more capable, more complete. And as Cassian looked at his alpha, his daughter, and the life they'd built together, he knew with absolute certainty that taking that risk, letting Rowan in, accepting the bond, was the best decision he'd ever made. Sometimes the things we fear most are exactly what we need. Sometimes surrender is the bravest thing we can do, and sometimes love really does conquer all, especially when it's built on respect, trust, and the courage to be vulnerable with someone who's proven they'll cherish that vulnerability rather than exploit it. Cassian had spent his whole life building walls to protect himself. But with Rowan, he'd learned that the strongest protection came not from walls, but from having someone who would stand beside you, fight for you, and love you exactly as you are. And that was worth every risk. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love should empower rather than diminish, that the right person will enhance your life rather than control it, leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to let the right person in, that vulnerability with someone trustworthy is strength, not weakness. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is allow ourselves to be loved completely, and to love completely in return.